Hi everyone, welcome to our final presentation for Cybersecurity Network Defense. We are Team 1 comprised of Christian Calipusan, Shivam Patel, Brian Che, and Steven Scully. As a team, we have worked collaboratively to dissect vulnerabilities, implement defenses, and evaluate the effectiveness of our solutions. Each member has brought unique expertise and perspectives to ensure a comprehensive and robust approach to network security. Now, let's dive into these key findings. In this overview of the project, we'll cover the background, the top 10 vulnerabilities identified, our plan for addressing them, and our conclusion. The goal of this project is to scan all hosts within a single network using the Nessus Essentials Scanner. These hosts include Metasploitable 2, Security Onion, Windows 10, pfSense, and Kali. After scanning, we'll evaluate the results to identify vulnerabilities and determine appropriate mitigation or remediation actions. This slide summarizes the vulnerabilities detected across our virtual machines. In total, 1,151 vulnerabilities were identified. Notably, the two instances of Metasploitable 2 with both IP addresses account for the highest number of vulnerabilities, each exceeding 375. Given that Metasploitable 2 has the most vulnerabilities, many of which are critical, we decided to prioritize our efforts here. Specifically, we will address the top 10 vulnerabilities of Metasploitable 2. This targeted approach ensures that we mitigate the most significant risk first, leading to an improved security posture for our network. Our focus on Metasploitable 2 is a strategic decision to tackle the highest risk vulnerabilities. This slide presents the top 10 vulnerabilities identified in our scans. These include critical issues like shell shock, GhostCat, and SSL protocol weaknesses. Addressing these vulnerabilities is essential for enhancing our network security.
The first vulnerability we are going to be covering is the Apache Tomcat AJP connector request injection or GhostCat vulnerability, which was found on our Metasploitable 2 machine. This vulnerability came in with a severity rating of critical and has a CVSS score of 9.8. The GhostCat vulnerability allows attackers to remotely read web application files on vulnerable servers or upload Java server pages code among numerous file types and gain remote code execution if exploited. As a team, we have decided to remediate this vulnerability by first upgrading to Tomcat installation version 9.0.31, where the vulnerability has been addressed. Next, we will determine if the AJP connector is used in our environment. If the AJP connector is not in use, we will disable the connector completely through changes in the server.xml file located in the Catalina home/conf directory. To further safeguard our system, we will also restrict access to the AJP port 8009 to trusted hosts only. With the vulnerability identified, the overall change to the risk in our network will remain at critical until the vulnerability has been addressed. The next vulnerability we are going to be covering is the Bash remote code execution or shell shock vulnerability, which was found on our Metasploitable 2 machine. This vulnerability came in with a severity rating of critical with a CVSS score of 9.8. This vulnerability is related to a flaw found in the shell's specially crafted environment variables, which attackers can use to override or bypass restrictions and execute shell commands. As a team, we have decided to remediate this vulnerability by updating our system to have the latest Bash package list that includes a patched version of Bash. We can do this by entering the commands sudo apt-get update and sudo apt-get install bash. This command ensures the system is installed with the latest patch version of Bash. And once completed, we will need to reboot the system to ensure the system has applied all the changes. With the vulnerability identified, the overall change to the risk in the network can be downgraded to high, as the vulnerability still needs to be addressed as soon as possible, but the remediation can be done through a simple version upgrade from the shell. The next vulnerability we are going to be covering is the SSL version 2 and 3 protocol detection, which was found on our Metasploitable 2 machine. This vulnerability came in with a severity rating of critical and has a CVSS score of 9.8. SSL version 2 and 3 are outdated, insecure cryptographic protocols that have known vulnerabilities that attackers can exploit to eavesdrop on network communications or perform man-in-the-middle attacks. As a team, we have decided to remediate the vulnerabilities by disabling SSL version 2 and 3 on the server and enabling TLS version 1.2 through changes in the Apache configuration file. With this vulnerability identified, the change to the overall risk in our environment is now low, as we are able to address this vulnerability quickly and the remediation process is relatively simple.
The next vulnerability we will be talking about is weak Debian open SSH keys. This affected our Security Onion virtual machine, receiving a score of 9.8 out of 10 on the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. As a team, we have chosen to remediate this vulnerability by addressing the weak SSH keys. To begin, we used PuTTY Key Generator to create new, stronger keys. The industry standard algorithms to choose from are RSA, DSA, and ECDSA. We then replace the existing keys within our authorized keys file on our virtual machine with the newly generated ones. Once completed, we ensure to restrict access to the authorized keys file to only specific personnel with a valid need to know. The next vulnerability found after concluding the scan is Apache Tomcat SEOL, affecting our Metasploitable 2 virtual machine. This vulnerability received a score of 10 on the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, making the overall risk to the network high. Metasploitable 2 being an intentionally vulnerable image for penetration testing, we have chosen to accept but mitigate the risk. To do so, we ensure that we assign Metasploitable 2 to a different network from our critical virtual machines. Through the use of a firewall, we are able to segment those two networks. This segmentation will allow us to control inbound and outbound traffic from Metasploitable, effectively mitigating inherent risks associated with running an intentionally vulnerable machine. The next vulnerability found within the network is OpenSSH SSL Package Random Number Generator Weakness. This vulnerability was found on our Security Onion virtual machine and received a score of 10 on the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, making the overall risk to the network high. We chose to remediate the vulnerability by updating our version of OpenSSH and SSL, as the vulnerability can be a result from end-of-life software. We then regenerate our SSH keys and SSL TLS certificates due to the vulnerability causing a limited amount of randomness during the key generation process, making them susceptible to brute force. Once regenerated, we can delete all remnants of SSH and SSL TLS certificates, as we assume them to be compromised.
A long list of critical vulnerabilities were found on the Metasploitable 2 virtual machine. They were all related to running older versions of Ubuntu Linux. Each of these vulnerabilities scored a 10 on the CVSS scale, and that indicates a high risk. The main cause for these vulnerabilities is missing security patches. Having these vulnerabilities can open up doors to remote code execution, denial of service attacks, and having weak encryption. Services like DHCP, OpenSSL, and Samba are also affected. The fix is relatively simple, and that is to update the host with all missing security patches. This should be standard practice when maintaining an information system. The version of the Unreal RCD installed on Metasploitable 2 contains a Trojan backdoor that allows unauthenticated attackers to run commands on the host. This vulnerability poses a high risk, since an attacker can use it to fully compromise the system or a host. They would be able to implant additional malware or pivot across the network. Remediation involves removing the compromised version, installing the latest clean release, and conducting a full system audit. Tenable discovered that the VNC server on the Metasploitable 2 machine is secured with the default password. This allows any remote attacker to gain full graphical access to the host. With this access, attackers can view the desktop, control the mouse and keyboard, install malware, or exfiltrate data. This issue stems from poor password hygiene. The fix is to update the VNC server with a strong, complex password and to audit access settings to prevent unauthorized remote sessions.
The last vulnerability we are going to be covering is the ISC bind service downgrade reflected DOS vulnerability found on our Metasploitable 2 machine. This vulnerability came in with a severity rating of high with a CVSS score of 8.6. This vulnerability can be exploited to perform denial of service attacks, and attackers may be able to downgrade the service or use it to amplify attacks against other targets. As a team, we have decided to remediate this issue by upgrading the bind service to the latest stable version using the distribution's packet manager. We have also decided to implement features such as rate limiting, restricting recursion to trusted clients, and enabling response rate limiting, while also disabling unnecessary features and ensuring proper access control lists. Continuous monitoring through tools like DNS stop and system logs is vital for detecting anomalous DNS traffic. Implementing a web application firewall or intrusion detection and prevention system can also help mitigate reflected DOS attacks by filtering malicious traffic.
In conclusion, our team successfully identified and analyzed vulnerabilities across various virtual machines using Nessus Essentials Scanner. Out of a total of 1,151 vulnerabilities, we focus on the top 10 critical issues, providing clear mitigation and remediation plans. Key takeaways from this project include the importance of strategic risk management, whether by remediating, mitigating, or accepting risks, as well as the critical role of proactive cybersecurity measures in network defense. Thank you for your attention, and we hope this presentation emphasized the significance of robust vulnerability management practices.